Hi, Eric, Module 1 Introduction, a little bit about myself to start. Uh, First off, professional and school demographics. Went to Kansas State University, was from a small town of Alma, Kansas, about 23 miles from Manhattan, Kansas. Have lived in Manhattan, Kansas since 1994. 18 years in the teaching profession, all at the same middle school here in town. Manhattan has two middle schools. That's 7, 8. We're going to switch in 2 years to a 6, 7, 8 building. ESLOL certified. EMS is a Title I school. We serve about 475 7th and 8th graders. We do have the teaming concept, which, for those of you that haven't heard of that, means that we have English, math, social studies, and science teachers as a core team, and we serve about 120 of the same kids who then have different electives. I've been married for 16 years. I've come from a family of educators. My parents were both educators. My wife is an educator. We have four wonderful kids. I've been lucky enough to coach my kids' sports growing up. I'm also a coach at Eisenhower Middle School and coach a number of sports, and have really kind of followed my parents' motto of uh, having the kids, our own kids, try to get them traveling around the United States and experience things. And experience is always going to be more important than possessions. To start, the first question was, why do politics influence school, but did not necessarily move school leaders to take action based on politics? It comes down to, student needs and political agendas are not always aligned. It's going to be a huge difference when we're talking about rural versus inner city schools. I mean, as I said before, I came from and was a part first K through 12 in a rural community. It was a community of about 1,000 people, and now obviously in a much bigger school district, a 6A school district coming from a 2A. And so I've been a student in a small rural community and now teach in a little bit larger community, obviously not huge like Kansas City or Wichita areas, but um, the needs are certainly different for those kids. And so the actions taken by leaders in schools start with individual student needs and not politics. We have been working in our school to create individualized learning plans for each kid. And that's a lot of work, but it's needed because kids simply are different from one another. The second question was, why did standards focus on outcomes and seemingly split the work and skills of a profession from the knowledge and wisdom of that profession? Again, one size fits all testing approach, not the best measure of learning for all students. It just doesn't work as well as I think they intended it to. I think the idea of making teachers and schools responsible is a great idea in theory, but it just got out of control. Our math and reading get tested the most in our school. They lose 10 days of education, and that's just those two subjects. This year in the eighth grade, each of our kids will be tested, state tested, in all four categories: social studies, science, English, and math. You're talking about easily, 3 weeks at least of educated time in a classroom that's being lost. And so what it leads to is apathy from the kids if they don't take these tests as serious as they need to, and then the data is just not there. So that's certainly something that needs to change. Next question was, why the standards evolved to explicitly call for school leaders' direct action. Teachers and leaders must often fight for the needs of their students through political means and community stakeholders. That's tough to do at times when you're talking about each leader, taking action based on individual needs of their building, compared to what maybe the general public thinks we should be doing. And a lot of times that, they just honestly don't see what we see on a daily basis. And I'll talk a little bit about that here to come. But it just can be vastly different from one area to another. And especially when you live in a predominantly rural state of Kansas, what their needs are and funding issues for busing and things like that is going to be vastly different than our own. Why school leaders must become political activists on behalf of students and their families. This is we at the beginning of the school year we looked at a lot of data, and I honestly had no idea that in our community that I live, Manhattan, Kansas, here, that we had 53% of our African American population did not graduate high school. That's super unacceptable, and it was kind of jaw dropping to see that it was that high. We have 300 kids in our district that are homeless or in between homes, and that was kind of a shock too. And so, what do we do to help those kids that need our help the most? We have to have the community understand that, have our politicians understand that, that these are the people that we really need to be helping the most. And my last point on there was, gifted programs and accelerated classes. Yes, we still need them, obviously, um, but let's be honest, the kids that are needing our help the most maybe aren't getting served with as much uh, as we need to give them, and give them these individual plans and really outreach into the community like we need to. Number five was, why do politics surrounding educational policies provide the strongest connection between what school leaders feel and do and their abilities to strategically think about how to handle it all? I think the hardest thing for a leader is to make sure everyone feels empowered. If everyone feels empowered, then everyone's going to want to work harder in that community. And that's what schools are, as communities. We have to, as a leader, as a principal, how do you make your teachers feel empowered that they are the ones making the choices in their own classrooms? How do you make the community feel like they are empowered in their own child's education? How do you make the kids feel empowered to do great things in their classroom? And when that happens, and everyone starts feeling empowered and working together, the school can really become a community and do great things. And so that's obviously a little bit tougher than to say it than to actually do it. But in my mind, that's what needs to be done to balance this vision of policy from politicians who might not necessarily see what we see on a daily basis. Personal and professional thoughts on how politics influence. As a social studies teacher, it's been tough the last few years, just to deal with the negativity. Kids come in with what their parents are saying at home, and it's usually leads to, for lack of a better term, anger on both sides. And so I think, as right now, as an educator, as a guy who teaches history and political science, that my biggest goal is to try to teach these kids to respect each other and respect their differences and understand how to communicate with one another in a respectful way. Is huge. And the other one is basically how to deal with the stress of our profession. I think those outside of our profession don't have an understanding of how stressful our jobs can be and how many balls we're trying to juggle at the same time. And all of it leads to a little bit more stress. And so, how do we manage that? And, when we're talking about leadership, what our leaders can do to minimize some of that stress on us. And then the last one was, what do you propose will help you improve or enhance your current educational leadership decisions and practices? Certainly more community outreach, getting into the community, showing people that you care. People will work hard if they feel cared for, if they feel empowered again. We have to figure out a way to help, the people that really need the most help in our communities, and to really reach out and try to break some of these cycles that aren't good for society. And so the other thing that I think is it seems like our kids are really struggling a little bit more with mental health, and so how do we get more funding to support those kids and their basic needs? I don't think bullying is, it's changed, I guess I should say, in the last few years, to where it isn't blatantly out in front of you, maybe as much as now behind the scenes with devices and on the Instagram and chat rooms and things like that. And so, how do we really help kids uh, to be better and be better members of our society? So, thanks for listening.